Welcome to What's in a Game. On today's show, Ashley Levy joins the pod to evaluate the Nuggets offseason. But first, Nikola Jokić played basketball this weekend, and the amount of fun he had in that exhibition game begs the question, is the best way to fix the All-Star game to just give up on it? And finally, we're going to tier list the off seasons for all the projected playoff teams. Stay tuned. Welcome back to What's in a Game. I'm Grace Jean here with my co-host Will Jones. How are you doing today, Will?
I'm great. Excited because we have a special guest.
Yes, we do. So here with us today is Asher Levy, their basketball analyst, a writer for the Asher Levy Substack, and YouTuber extraordinaire, as well as Calvin Booth's biggest fan. How are you doing today, Asher?
I'm doing pretty all right. I feel like so many of those labels are hyperbolic, but it is the internet, so I guess you get that. Yeah, Calvin Booth's biggest fan goes to CT, and 1.1K subs is extraordinary, I guess. But yeah,
It's
we
awesome.
sure think so.
If any listeners of us have not gone and checked out Asher's writing or videos and podcasts, please go and do that.
Okay, so before we jump into talk about the Nuggets offseason, I want to talk about a couple of news items here. Jokić and Luka were playing in this game. See friends having fun. Got Jokić trying crazy things that, don't work. He actually had a look at this. Vooch was in this game as well. Vlatko played in this game too. No standout moments from that perspective for me. But this was a missed corner three by Jokić, and he kind of fought to tap the rebound back to himself and then ran in and dunked it. Little sidestep three there. He's having a lot of fun. But watching this game where all these stars came together to give Goran Dragić this nice farewell in his last basketball game before he officially fully retires, made me wonder if we treated the All-Star game purely as an exhibition game instead of trying to make it competitive. Do you think that it would actually increase the entertainment value of this product that I think for the last several years a lot of people have been complaining about because it's just not what it used to be?
I mean, I don't think it was ever competitive, if we're being honest about it. I think it's like the Pro Bowl, right? Like, it just doesn't matter. As someone who makes content pretty regularly, I treat it as a break because in the middle of the season, I mean, during the off season, it's different. You can go a week without talking and you're probably not missing much, but during the season, things are happening every day. So if I get a chance to take a break, I'm taking the break. And it's not fun to watch to me most of the time. Like, I'll watch the 3-point contest. I'll watch the dunk contest, even if those have the 3-point contest is fine. The dunk contest has gotten a little stale, but it's like on a Sunday night, am I going to watch an All-Star game or am I going to just play video games or something, chill with friends? And I'll probably choose the latter most of the time because it's already an exhibition game. They try and frame it as a competitive thing, but I don't think even if they twisted the messaging at all, it's really going to change much because it is basically already an exhibition game. If they were just like, hey, we're going to goof around, it's like, you guys already do that. So I don't think it would change much.
I didn't watch the game because of that kind of reason, where I was expecting Jokić to treat it kind of like the All-Star game, and I saw the highlights.
This
the
was
self
such
alley-oop.
a fun moment.
The self alley-oop was a cool one. That's all I want out of Jokić, is just to provide some fun, I guess.
I want him to have fun.
Yeah, I agree with Asher. All sports are going to this where there's already enough criticism of too much play and too many games and too many injuries that it just makes the question of playing another competitive game that doesn't really get them much. It just puts that further into question.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that changing the expectations of the game could actually make it more enjoyable for everyone, because currently about half the guys in the All-Star game look kind of miserable when they're playing it, and the ones who are goofing off and whatever are the ones that, look like they're actually, having some fun. If we're going to treat All-Star weekend like this, like showcase of basketball and like this thing for like kids and families really, then I think making the game more like that too would actually could actually have some positive value. All right. So our next news item, let's say, has to do with the young Denver Nuggets, who have been in Colorado for a few weeks now. They have been working out in the gym. Christian Braun has been there for basically that entire time, it seems. Duran has been spending a lot of time with the team as well. You see him in his boot. He's having fun with the guys. And notably absent from every social media drop of the team since Summer League is Jalen Pickett, actually. Asher, I was wondering if you had any particular thoughts about that, because I've seen literally every other starter that, like, the young guys basically, there, including all of the two-way players. So his absence is definitely, I think, loud.
Yeah, I don't really know why that would be, because, like, I don't expect him to necessarily get waived before the season. I wouldn't be shocked by it, but I don't really expect it either. And from what we're aware, there's no injury or anything. And even if there was, Dayron is there, and he tore his Achilles.
Exactly. I think that's what made me think, like, okay, I don't really know what to make of this.
Like, even Hunter Tyson has been in a lot of those posts, and it's like,
and PJ.
Yeah, it's like, if you're gonna include literally everybody, including I think Trey Alexander has been in a couple of them. It is kind of weird that he's not there, but also I don't know whether to read into it too much or not, because it is just social media posts. Maybe some personal stuff came up or something, and he just couldn't make it. Maybe he's going to get waived, so they sent him down to the Gold, and he's working out there. Like, also, none of this is sourced or anything. Like, I'm not, but
no, this is pure speculation based on the Denver Nuggets social media posts.
Yeah. So it's like, could I see him getting waived? Yeah. But also, I don't know. Like, maybe he's just on vacation or something.
Yeah. Entirely possible. Yeah. I think the fact that Duran was out there, like, in the boot is what made it, like, even more kind of at the forefront of my mind. But yeah, we don't know what's going on there yet. And there's another Nugget who we have some questions about, but we'll get to that when we talk about the specific moves this offseason. The last major news item, I think, came just yesterday when Bennett Durando over at the Denver Post published an interview that he had with Josh Kroenke this past weekend after a golf tournament. I find it so interesting that we get these, like, snippets of interviews where you have reporters that are like, oh, everyone's at this golf tournament, I'm just gonna go and, like, try to get these questions answered. But Bennett asked about how the team views the second apron and whether they see it as effectively a hard cap, especially because I think at some point in the interview, Josh compared the new CBA style to the NHL with all of the restrictions that teams are dealing with. And I just wanted to read this other quote that Josh gave about the current roster for anybody speculating about whether they're going to make any other moves. He said, I think right now the roster is pretty set for this year, but you never know. Our eyes and ears are always open. The new rules are interesting, and how some of those trades work once you're over the tax. But it was an eye-opener, I think, for a lot of teams this summer in how some of the teams behaved. I thought that this was an interesting quote, because to me, it says that a lot of teams were sort of caught off guard by the rules in the CBA that, again, came into effect last summer, or the CBA came into effect. Some of the new rules didn't come into effect until this summer, but they were known in writing, or should have been known, perhaps not known, but they were in writing last summer. Asher, what do you make of that quote from Josh, and in the context of how the offseason has gone for the Nuggets?
I think that might be the most politician quote I've heard Josh Kroenke say, where it's very non-committal. He's like, we might trade, but I also think that our roster's good right now. And it was an eye-opener for some teams, maybe our team, like it was very non-committal. Like it's 3 sentences and every sentence is like not saying anything. But I do think that it shows that some teams aren't as prepared as you might think. Like I've talked to a lot of NBA staff, over the last few years. And while a lot of them do know way more than any of us will ever know, a lot of them will forget more than I know. A lot of them also just kind of overlook a lot of basic stuff. Like there are some teams that haven't done like character background checks when drafting, and it's led to a lot of weird locker room stuff. Not the Nuggets, but like that's happened with some teams, and a lot of the basic stuff that you would figure, oh, they're an NBA team, they would probably have this nailed down, just doesn't happen. So like they might have just been caught off guard entirely by the new CBA, like a lot of NBA teams. And I think it's weird that would happen because like just pull up a Twitter thread on it and it'll explain some of it to you.
One of my threads, one of your threads.
Yeah.
Anyone who we talked to this summer
like
for the past year has been talking about this stuff.
Yeah, like it's been a huge talking point for a lot of people. Just hire a salary. Like every team has salary cap guys. This isn't a new like position because of the CBA. Like there are dudes who their entire job is, hey, understand the CBA, understand how the salary cap works, and give us that information. And most of the time, these are people who've gone through like law school or business school, something like that, where they have degrees of reading contracts and all that stuff. And that is exactly what the CBA is. And it still caught people off guard. That seems like surprising to me.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying when we were talking about it on our show, that yes, maybe this whole CBA, the final draft was introduced pretty quickly in terms of when it was going to go into effect, but there was still like a year, I think, in between to kind of read most of it, even if it wasn't the finalized version.
It was the finalized version. The rules that came into effect this summer were in there. It was just stated that they wouldn't come into effect until this summer.
They were sort of grandfathered in.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're giving deals like the Zeke Najee deal, shouldn't you know how, like, this is still millions of dollars. You should know at least how that's going to affect your future flexibility, as was the quote that was said.
When you make Zeke Najee your 5th highest paid player, you should expect to have that affect you in the new CBA.
Yeah, clearly he must have had a vision for Zeke that was not fulfilled. So, yeah. We'll see how this season goes, because it looks like with Duran's injury, we're going to have to play him some.
Mm-hmm.
That does look like how it's going to go.
As we always do when we have a guest for the first time on the show, we love to get to know them. So, Asher, please tell us how you became a fan of basketball in general and the Nuggets, and just like how you got into working with people in the NBA and writing about it.
Yeah, so I've always liked sports, but when I was younger, I liked tackle football, and I played it. And then my first half of my first game ever, I got a concussion. So I didn't play much after that. And I was like, I want a new sport to play. And basketball was just the most accessible to me. So I was like, okay, well, because I'm a Dolphins fan because I used to live in Florida.
Wow.
So yeah, I got into football I was playing Madden when I was 2. So like I would like the Dolphins because I was in Florida when I got into football, and I like the Nuggets because I lived here when I got into basketball, which was probably, I started watching loosely when I was like around 2013, 2012. Like the Iggy team was like the first year I paid somewhat close attention to it, but also I was 9 that year, so it wasn't like anything too in depth. And then after that, I started getting into it more, and I always liked writing. So I was just I would, when I was in middle school, I'd just write like articles in Google Docs because I was really bored. Like there was one where I tried to make an argument for Isaiah Thomas to win MVP that one year where he averaged like 29 points and everything. And then eventually I got bored enough to where I was like, well, you know what? I'm old enough. I know enough to make YouTube videos because I was like 16 back then, I think. Yeah, I was around 16 when I first started uploading. Eventually I was just like, let me try and get like a writing job out of this. So I DM'd Ryan Blackburn, who you guys, I'm pretty sure know. And he's a lovely guy. Love Ryan. I just DM'd him like, hey, man, you got any jobs? Here's my YouTube channel. Here's a script I'm writing. And I came on as sort of an intern at first. And then he left Stiffs the year after that, which left some writing, higher level staff writing on the table. And they liked my stuff enough my first years to where I got hired on as like a lead writer, or promoted, I guess, to like a lead writer position. Then I went to games and all that stuff. I covered the team up until I got laid off. And then from there, I took a little bit of time off because I got, it's a lot of work. I was putting in like 70 hours a week probably into all that because I was going to the games like every home game, and you get there at like 3 hours before tip off. And I stayed there until 1 a.m. some nights writing like after the game because I needed to write game recaps and I had quotes that I needed to transcribe and all that stuff. But that's like not uncommon. Like Ryan stayed later than me most nights. Matt Moore stays very late. Like the DNVR guys stay late. Like it's a lot of work to be a beat writer. And I mean, even if I'm just at home, I'm watching tape, I'm breaking down stuff because I was also doing a lot of draft stuff around that time because I was trying to become a scout. I mean, as far as meeting NBA workers, if you work in the space long enough, you just kind of meet people. You go to Summer League, you meet people. And then I started uploading again earlier this year. And that's just sort of where I'm at now.
Are we going to get any more of these Pokemon-inspired draft prospect cards?
Yeah, probably. That's a shorts format I sort of came up with. And I like the idea of it. I just haven't really sat down to like record a ton of them. But I'm going to be on vacation for a couple of months coming up. So I'm probably going to pre-record a few of those.
So the next question I wanted to ask you from that perspective, like you said, you were doing a lot of work on the draft and working on becoming a scout. And so you got into this habit of like maybe having a slightly different perspective on how players play, how they fit into a system versus like what they can do individually. From that lens, how did you view the Nuggets roster during the 23 title run and maybe compare it to how they looked last season?
Yeah, I mean, I liked Christian Braun a lot as a prospect coming out. I had him, I think, top 20 on my big board, if not around 20, 21, somewhere in that zone. He came out looking about as I expected, like, high-level defender, wasn't a great shooter, hustle guy, competitor, because it was very clear, like, just watching tape. He hustles, he competes at a high level, very physical defender, and I liked that draft pick a lot. I wasn't high on Peyton Watson at all coming out of college. That quickly turned around at Summer League, though. Like, one thing that people underestimate when looking at the draft stuff is that these guys do like behind closed doors workouts and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a lot of the initial hype came for Christian Braun, because I watched some of his high school stuff before that college cycle had started, and I liked his stuff there a lot. And then he looked awful at UCLA, like just really bad. He averaged, I think,
Are you talking about
3.3
Peyton?
points. 3.3 points on like 38% from the field or something. Like really, like lowest scoring first round pick of all time, at least at that time. Then you get to meet him, you get to talk to him, and you get to see what he can do. And it's like, oh, okay, there was something here that I just didn't see on tape. Because you watch a guy in person and his athleticism stood out to me immediately.
Yeah.
And it was clear that he had a good like head on his shoulders. He was like, yeah, I'm a developmental player, but I'm going to work. Like it was very PR sort of stuff, but also it was stuff that I could tell he genuinely was like, hey, I want to develop.
It's
all this
PR stuff that like not every prospect does.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I became high on Peyton after that. And then Bruce Brown, it was just sort of a no-brainer, and so is KCP. So I liked that roster a lot. The entire year I thought they were going to win the title. And then when the playoffs came, I was like, there's just no one that's going to get in their way. Like in a lot of ways, that championship run was like just sort of felt inevitable to me from the first round, where it was like they're just better than everybody. And then the next year came and they were not better than everybody, because the formula for 23 was, oh, we have 6 star level guys. Then we have Christian and Jeff, who are like fine 7th, 8th man. And then they lost Bruce. Nothing they could really do about that. Like I don't blame the front office for losing Bruce, because just in the CBA, you can't pay him as much as the Pacers paid him. And he would be a fool to turn down, $22 million. Then they just didn't really replace him. They drafted more guys, and from that class, Strawther was like fine. I liked Strawther enough as a prospect to be like, okay, I can see him being a rotation level guy in like a couple of years. And then they drafted Jalen Pickett and Hunter Tyson, and I didn't get the logic there, because these are guys that are not good enough to compete at an NBA level. They shouldn't, like, they're not NBA roster level guys, in my opinion, for the most part. And they're also 24 and 25 now. And they were, I think, 23 and 24 coming out during the draft.
Right. Less of an upside play, even.
Yeah. If you're drafting in the second round, either draft older guys that can play or draft younger guys that can develop into something potentially in the future. The second round is very hard to hit on, but if you are taking up guaranteed roster spots, we're going to, judge them from you have a guaranteed contract for 4 years, or at least 2 years, like 3 years plus 1, I think is the structure of those contracts. So you guarantee these guys money. So by your logic, we will judge them based off that. And I think Calvin really screwed up in that draft. Like, I think Strawther will be good. The other two they prohibit certain things that you can do with the roster because of the guaranteed money. Like, you could have brought in a Lonnie Walker. You could have brought in a Dennis Smith Jr. You could have brought in, a lot of these guys that are still out there on minimums. But instead, you are paying
Justin Holiday.
Yeah, instead you're paying Jalen Pickett and Hunter Tyson guaranteed money and taking up guaranteed roster spots for not only this season but next season as well. So unless you want to eat that money, which, judging by how the Kroenkes have acted this offseason, they probably don't want to do, it'll be hard to, get a lot of free agents in, because you're just taking up too many roster spots with guys who don't contribute at an NBA level, in my opinion. Like, if you look at last season, DeAndre Jordan is a great locker room guy. I have no problems with him being on the roster, but that's a roster spot that's probably not going to play. Zeke Naji had the worst on-off of any player that qualified last year, according to Clean Glass.
Then you had, I mean, Jokic had the best on-off, so.
But when you're a negative 26, it gets a little grim. And then like half the roster was on like rookie contracts. It was like 7 or 8 roster spots, including Vlatko, who like tore his ACL and was not going to play. So you were wasting like 7 or 8 roster spots last year, and that's just not how you should run a title contender.
All right, so let's transition into the Nuggets' moves from this offseason in particular. You've made it no secret that you think the offseason was less than ideal. I pulled this quote from your most recent piece, where I actually wanted to just read it in full because it expresses a sentiment that I think a lot of fans can identify with. Right now, we're seemingly sitting to see what happens with an aging Russell Westbrook. They haven't signed anybody but Dario Saric. This is before they had made the Russ signing official. And in the arms race that is the Western Conference, they are lollygagging. They're not on track to be the headliners like the Spurs dynasty was, but instead a single footnote in an era that was waiting to be claimed by a team. The reason I like this quote is that the sentiment that you're kind of expressing here about Jokić being this all-time great, and fans, like I said, including myself, can identify with it, to some degree, regardless of how we feel within some reasonable range about this offseason. Fans are upset because they perceive that wasting his prime is this grave injustice, right? I wanted to know, since you've written that piece, do you still feel basically that strong about how the Nuggets offseason has gone, especially in the context of now that the Russ deal is done? Just give us your brief overall assessment before we jump into the individual moves.
Yeah, I would say I still feel about as strong. Not as emotionally oh, this is whatever. That was written during in between the Saric and the Russ signing, where it was oh, this is really grim. And I still think it's really grim, but I've come to terms, just I've had time to just be yeah, it is what it is. But I do think,
actually, Asher, could you comment on what you think the minimum responsibility of a GM of this team? Because Calvin Booth talked about his responsibility as the steward of Nikola Jokic's prime. What do you think is the minimum responsibility of a GM with this roster, with Nikola Jokić on it right now?
Put a good supporting cast around him. If you put a good supporting cast around Jokić, you will at least be competing for a title, and they're still competing for a title. I know a lot of people have overreacted and been oh, they're out of the title race. No, they're not. They have Jokić, they have Jamal, they have MPJ, they have Gordon. That's great. But when your fifth starter is Christian Braun, who Christian is a good player, but your biggest issue was arguably your three-point shooting, and was your ball handling, and was point of attack defense at some points. And you let a top 10 perimeter defender in the league go, and a top 15 shooter go, and someone who was very willing to take that fifth starter role and not take a ton of shots and would compete all the time, had a good motor, has been a piece of two separate championship teams, and you just let him go because you wanted to develop young guys. That's not how title contention has ever worked in the league. And I get wanting to revolutionize stuff, but at a certain point, there's a reason that things are the way they are some of the time. And I don't think you should be relying on second and third year guys as significant pieces of your rotation to compete. It's one thing if, you take a rookie and they turn out to be really good, and then you can play them. If it's one or two rookies, cool, man. If it's one or two young guys, cool. Yeah, if they hit, and they're good players. I have no problem with Christian playing a good chunk of minutes on a championship team. He's shown that he can do that. But Peyton, as high as I am on him long term, he couldn't really play in the playoffs in the Timberwolves series because he just didn't have any offensive juice. And Julian Strawther, he might be a good shooter, but he shot 29% from three last year. And also, he's not really a good defender. He's very skinny. He can get pushed off his spots easy. Who knows if he can play in the playoffs? And then you look at Jalen Pickett and Hunter Tyson. They don't have any NBA skills, really. Hunter Tyson might be a good level NBA shooter, but we're past the Joe Harrises of the world. We're past the point where you can play guys who are only shooters. And he's not 6'8", like they list him at. He's probably closer to 6'5", 6'6". We've seen the pictures of him standing next to Christian. He looks shorter than Christian, some of them.
Or is Christian taller than we think?
I don't. Yeah. It's either way, he's just not an NBA level rotation player, especially for a contender. If it was the Charlotte Hornets, that's one thing. Maybe he could get some minutes for the Hornets. But when you're talking about trying to compete for a title, trying to trying to do the best with the prime of, in my opinion, the best player of this generation, someone who might go down as a top 10 player of all time, who is the best passer we've seen since LeBron or Magic Johnson. You could say so many things about Jokić that have already been said. Yeah. I don't need to go on.
Too many things.
When you have that level of talent on your roster, I think it's just, you got to do everything you can to surround him with good players. And right now there's a lot of unproven guys on this roster. And then the veterans they do have, they traded 3 second-round picks to get off Reggie Jackson. You know what you could have done if you didn't want to give Reggie Jackson a 2-year contract? don't give him a fucking 2-year contract. Like, it's really simple to just be like, hey, you weren't that good. So, like, it was a handshake deal when he agreed to the buyout. Hey, we're going to give you this contract, which, like, sure, man, I get. But also, he didn't play really at all once you signed him. And you're going to give him the taxpayer mid-level exception for a 1+1? Like, that was probably to maintain agent relationships and all that stuff. I get that. But you shouldn't be salary dumping Reggie Jackson on a 1-year, $5 million deal. You shouldn't really be taking all these roster spots up with guys who don't matter in the grand scheme of things. You should be trying to get, like, if you're going to draft young guys with upside, draft guys who are going to contribute, draft guys who aren't these late 20s round, like, age-wise. Pick guys who will actually fucking play. Like, Day'Ron, I liked the pick of, and it's unfortunate that he tore his Achilles, but I'm not going to dog Booth for that, because, like, I was really high on Day'Ron. That's a good pick. If he was healthy, he could have contributed, and you can't possibly see that coming. Like, I'm not going to blame Booth for that pick. I think that was one of the moves that I liked from this offseason. One of the very
it was like the one, like,
yeah, it was like
part of the offseason was on draft night.
Yeah, it was like, hey, man, we got our guy at least. And I think there was too much confidence coming off of the 2023 draft. I think hitting on Christian, hitting on Peyton made Booth feel like, oh, I'm just good at this shit. So he was like, you know, I'll draft whoever. And I think he got a little just too confident in that, and too confident in the 2 timelines thing, because we've seen a lot of teams try the 2 timelines thing. Name one time it's fucking worked.
I don't think we've seen a lot of teams try, but we've seen a few, and it hasn't worked out. We're going to talk about that when we get to talking about the young players. But I just wanted to comment on what you said earlier about that, you know, just put a good supporting cast around Jokić. That's the responsibility. You know, Will, you and I had this conversation about what is the responsibility of a GM, right? And I think, you know, you can comment on this if you disagree or if you agree. But I think we kind of came to the conclusion that if you have a roster around Jokić that should conceivably make a Western Conference Finals, and I think we both acknowledge that the West is a tougher conference than the East, then the GM has done their job. And to be clear, I actually think we had that last year. We had, you know, some bad injury luck. There were other, like, holes with the like problems with the roster, but that was a team that I think should have made the Western Conference Finals. They didn't. This year is more TBD, I think, because they've leaned a bit more into needing some of these guys who are question marks to turn into known quantities. Let's talk about one of the previously known quantities on this team, which is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, KCP. He went to the Orlando Magic for a 3-year, $66 million deal. The Nuggets did not try to keep him for anywhere near that number. So Josh Kroenke actually commented on this move as well in that that piece from Bennett Durando. Said, once we knew that Caldwell-Pope was going to opt out and test the open market, we thought it would probably be pretty difficult to retain him. And when he was asked about what the determining factor was about what number to go to during KCP's free agency, like, we were speculating about this throughout the entire summer. And so when the actual number came out as this $22 million a year was it's like, oh, okay. I thought that it would be way higher. That would be the thing that keeps, the team from re-signing him, because they had previously indicated during their end of season press conference that, signing him, at a reasonable number. So we understand that they could have been priced out reasonably, but I don't think that $22 million was it. But they said we had some pretty good offers in that we thought made sense for us going forward. But when you hit the open market and there are teams that have space and there are teams that really need a certain skill set, it's difficult. We've been smart in how we planned, and we think we have young players who can fill certain roles. Clearly referring to Christian Braun, they've made multiple references to him as probably being that fifth starter, although everyone around the team since then has kind of been distancing themselves from the idea that Christian is guaranteed that starting spot. But it does sound like as soon as they knew that KCP was going to opt out and not take his player option, that that was the number that was going to be too high, which was around between 17 and 18 million dollars.
Obviously, Christian fills some of that defensive role. His offense is a huge question. So, like with the Wolves, I think there was a sentiment that maybe Christian played Ant better than KCP. He was more physical or more strong, whereas KCP is more like playing defense with, his mind and his ability to navigate screens and like just anticipate what's coming as he's experienced. Now we just have one less player who can do that. Like you had maybe more advantage having KCP and having situationally bringing in a P-Watt or a Christian Braun. What were your kind of thoughts about the Wolves series, and how do you anticipate the Nuggets perimeter defense like going into this season in the playoffs?
Yeah, so my thing about the Wolves series is I do think Christian played Ant better than KCP. But also the thing that made the Nuggets good defensively is that you could throw different options at an Ant.
Mm-hmm.
If you needed someone more physical, you could throw out a Christian. But if you needed someone to guard, like you say, a Stephen Curry, who's running around screens. Christian isn't great at screen navigation. He's not like awful at it, but he's not great at it either. KCP is a top 3 probably screen navigator in the league. So if you're going against someone
Easily.
like that, you don't have an option for that really anymore. You have one guy now. So in 2 years, we've gone from the title team, which had Christian, Bruce, and KCP, to now our second best perimeter defender probably being Aaron Gordon. And we've seen that not be a formula for success before. Because take the Sun series from 2022 and the Sun series from 2023. Compare and contrast the defense in those series, and you'll quickly realize, oh, shit. The determining factor is that they had multiple options to throw at Devin Booker. If KCP wasn't working, they could throw Bruce at him. If neither of them
They
were working,
could guard
they could
pick
throw,
and roll. Like,
Yeah,
that
they
was
could-
kind of it.
And the whole thing with Jokić is that he is a good defender in some contexts, but you need to put that good context around him. And for that context to exist, you need good point of attack defenders. And they have one like guaranteed good point of attack defender, maybe P-Watt, but he's more of a weak side protector in my mind. Maybe Aaron, but he's more of a weak side protector in my mind. Like those guys are people who are used better on big forwards or in helping roles, free safetying, that sort of thing. As far as guards go, you only have one good defender now because Jamal Murray is not a good defender anymore. He used to be, but ever since the ACL thing, just hasn't really been that. You have Russ, who is like, can be good on defense, but most of his looking like a good defender just comes from him hustling a lot. And I don't think he's actually like a great defender. Then you have Julian Strawther, who is, as I touched on earlier, gets bumped off his spots a lot, can get caught ball watching. He's not really a good defender. You have Christian. That's it. And it significantly hamstrings their defensive versatility. It significantly hamstrings, I think, the defensive floor of the team and also the defensive ceiling of the team. It's a move that doesn't make any fucking sense to me because the thing about it is like, yeah, man, you would have been locked in the roster. But guess what? That roster won a fucking title. You won the title with KCP as your starting two guard, not with Christian. Christian is not as good as KCP on either end of the floor. And like he can replicate some of the stuff KCP does defensively, and he's a very high level defender. He's not as good as KCP on defense. And I get that giving a 31-year-old, I think it was, like
30.
30-year-old a long contract. Okay, sure, that's a little, but like
Long
KCP,
contract. Oh, we
Yeah,
talked about
but-
long contracts.
but KCP isn't really that old, and also his game should age well.
He was also
like,
clearly sought after, which is why it was so difficult to retain him this season.
and
Asher,
Theoretically.
I want to challenge you on something here because we talked about the Wolves series and how to your mind Christian played Ant better, and there is clearly an argument for having as much defensive versatility as possible. But I think that even the most staunch defenders of Malone might agree that he might have stuck with KCP for too long in the Wolves series in terms of being the primary matchup on Ant.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to ask you is, would it be reasonable for Calvin to assume that there'd be detrimentally fewer minutes in high leverage high leverage opportunities for Christian. And we're talking about Peyton and his defensive impact as well.
Mhm.
And potentially, Julian, who didn't play in the playoffs in the main rotation. Had he kept KCP, particularly at a higher number than even what his player option was, which is what he ended up getting, around $22 million a year.
In Calvin's mind, I think that makes complete sense for that to exist in Calvin's mind. But in my mind, which I don't think I know more than Calvin or anything, but having them play a ton of minutes in high leverage situations could be detrimental to the team rather than vice versa. Because Christian is not good. We saw that. The spacing with Peyton, not good. And then the defense with Julian Strawther, can assume, probably not great. There's a reason KCP was playing a lot, and it's because he's very reliable. And while he didn't have a great series, he's been on multiple title teams. He's one of the best role players in the league, and there's a reason that he got that money. Do you think, real quick, who's better, him or DeAndre Hunter?
Who, KCP or DeAndre Hunter?
Yeah, KCP or DeAndre Hunter.
I'm taking
DeAndre Hunter's making more than him. Clint Capella or KCP. KCP is making less than Clint
DeAndre
Capella.
Hunter just got his his rookie skill extension. So
but you could go through a lot of these guys, and they're very clearly worse than KCP and making more than KCP. You can afford to pay that. I think it's just the owners sort of being cheap about it, because I think Calvin does genuinely believe all the stuff he says, but also it gives the owners a really good excuse to be actually, we don't want to pay it all that. We've already won our title.
I completely think that the new CBA was
yeah.
We've talked about which classes of players may have won from this CBA and which may have lost, but I do think that the biggest winners of the new CBA are cheap owners, because now they have all the excuses in the world to not spend money. Okay, so let's talk about the non purely financial, let's say, tangible benefits, or at least a perk of letting KCP walk. We're under the second apron. The Nuggets get the taxpayer MLE. They're able to sign Dario Saric with that taxpayer MLE on a 1+1 deal.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. That's the Denver tax, right? Dario was actually 9th in minutes for the Golden State Warriors last year. He played 64 games. Zeke was 11th in minutes for the Nuggets last season, and he only played 58 games. My question to you is, despite both of these guys being, 9th men plus on their teams, not even playing 70 games as they're effectively backup fives on those teams, what are the chances that Zeke is actually able to benefit from Dario's presence in that backup five in terms of total minutes played, just because he might be the best backup 4 option next to Dario? Last year we were playing Peyton at the 4 effectively, and Dario's even smaller than Zeke, so I don't think that that's necessarily a great a super viable option long term in a regular season, just because of that front court size necessity, especially with Duran out this season with injury.
I don't think Zeke is ever gonna be a good player. So could he benefit from Dario? Yeah, because Dario is a good shooter and he would provide spacing and all that stuff. But in my mind,
he would also let Zeke play his, quote unquote natural position. We've heard a lot over the last couple of years about how Zeke might look better if he was playing the 4. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, he's probably more of a 4 than a 5, but his shot doesn't exist anymore. So a lot of the things of, he could be a stretch 4 and a switch big has kind of gone down, as sort of not anything notable, because he changed his shot form and now he's shooting 30% from 3 on low volume, where beforehand he was shooting 45. I don't know why you change your shot form when you're shooting 45% from 3, but that was a decision.
Shoot their weird shots.
That was a decision that him and the organization made. That wasn't a solely him decision, but that was a decision that was made, and he's clearly suffered from it because now most of his role is to roll to the basket, where he doesn't have good hands and can't catch a ball half the time. And on defense, it's be this switch big. Yeah, he's fine on defense. I don't think he's a huge negative on defense, but when you're just not great at any one skill or not even particularly good at any one skill, it's hard to justify playing you on an NBA court, especially for someone of the level of the Nuggets. Or like if you were to stagger MPJ with the second unit, I think that looks better than Zeke. If you were to stagger AG with the second unit, I think that looks better than Zeke. And I think a lot of free agents would have looked better than Zeke. I just don't think a backup front court of Zeke, Saric works, because I assume Peyton will be the backup three, and the spacing of a Zeke, Peyton, Watson lineup will not be good.
Well, we had that last year.
Yeah, and it wasn't good.
All right, touche.
And if Zeke just simply paid off in the way that they were hoping, would that have meant we could have kept KCP? Because I feel like the Dario Saric is a necessity. We had to sign some kind of front court depth. That also led to our ability to sign Russell Westbrook. Many people are trying to clarify that the Russell Westbrook signing was not a KCP replacement, but more of a Bruce Brown replacement, where we're trying to get a transition scorer, a ball handler, someone who can pass, maybe play some hustle defense. Obviously, I don't think Russ is going to be the same defensive player as Bruce, obviously, but you can get something out of him there.
Yeah.
And Josh Kroenke was also asked about Russ, and he said, I got a chance to meet him for the first time right after he signed, and as I said to him, I'm very grateful that he's on this side. I've watched him tear our hearts out for so many years in Oklahoma City. Obviously, he was referring to that buzzer beater that he hit in Denver. So he'll be a really good person for us to have on and off the court with some of the young guys who are expecting to take bigger roles this year. Russ has seen it all in and around the NBA, so he's going to be a big part of who we are, both in the locker room and on the court. Yeah, Asher, how are you feeling about the Russ signing so far in the mix of all this offseason noise?
It's a really weird signing for me to try and rank. I think it's the move this offseason with the highest boom or highest bust potential to me. I don't have any questions about the off-court stuff. Like, Russ is a great teammate from everything I've heard. Like, players love him, coaches love him. Like, he's genuinely a great teammate from what I've heard. And I don't think you can have enough great teammates in a locker room. And he wants to win. You know, that's not in question. He's going to do everything he can to make that happen. And I do see him more as a Bruce Brown replacement than a KCP replacement, as you mentioned. And I think he'll help the transition scoring a ton, because if you guys had to try and guess, where do you think the transition offense ranked league-wide last season for the Nuggets?
30th.
They were dead last.
Yeah.
They
were dead last for most of the season and then pulled into 29th in that like post All-Star.
And then they dropped back.
And they were like top 5 post All-Star when they were going on that big run.
Yep.
But
and then towards the end they dropped back down. They ended up being tied with the Hornets for transition offense, which a LaMelo ball-less Charlotte Hornets for the most of the season, may I point out. So it's that should help having Russ because he's still at 36 years old somehow a freak athlete, like still one of the fastest players in the league, still someone who can jump out of the gym. And he will push the rock. If there's one thing that Russell Westbrook will for sure do, it is take that and run. And I think that'll fit well next to Jokić. I think we'll see a lot of touchdown passes from Jokić to Russ. But, you know, a lot of questions come in the half-court sets, because how does he look as a off-ball player? Because if he's playing with Jokić most of the time, probably won't have the ball in his hands. Does he play the Aaron Gordon role in the half court? Does he, do 2-man game stuff with Yoke? Is he someone who will primarily have the ball in his hands? I'm interested to see what Malone does with him, because I do think there's ways to make him work, but I think there's also ways that it will look disastrous. I really think that he has a super high ceiling and a super low floor relative to expectation. I'm not saying he's going to be an all NBA or all-star player, but like he might be like a 6th starter level guy. He also might tank a lot of lineups he's in. It's completely possible that it goes either way.
Right. Another veteran that we have to make a decision on is Jamal Murray, who was back in the building. He was seen in the gym. practicing with Peyton. So Nuggets fans were happy to see that, since there's so much talk about his conditioning and his health and his level of play. To finish,
Nice to see Jamal smiling.
yeah, he was
As a
smiling,
Jamal
and
fan
yeah,
myself.
for sure. We had the contracts like with Reggie or Zeke, where the front office is maybe trying to show, hey, like, we take care of our guys, like, we believe in our dudes. Jamal was one of those players who some were arguing maybe got a max too early, or, you know, there were questions about whether he would live up to it. And then, of course, he did, and we won a championship, and he had an amazing playoffs. So it was kind of like almost like a Josh Kroenke trend that I was wondering if Calvin Booth was trying to show or demonstrate that he was doing that too with other players, where maybe he should have been more cautious. I don't know what's going on right now with
With
Jamal's.
Zeke.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Jamal's contract right now. If there's negotiating, if there's something Jamal's agent, him and his agent aren't happy with, or there's things that the Nuggets are worried about with protecting themselves. But it is kind of funny that we were kind of giving out these contracts like free candy to Hunter Tyson and gang. And are we maybe being too nitpicky with Jamal?
He should get it. Like, in my mind, you got to extend him. You got to extend Aaron Gordon. If you don't do that, you might as well kiss the window entirely goodbye. Like, the KCP thing was a big blow to it, but I think they still will compete for a title this season. If you lose either of those guys, goodbye. Like, you are not going to be able to replace either of them with the tools that you have. Because guess what? You're going to be in the second apron. You did all this to avoid the second apron. It's inevitable. If you want to compete with the current like salary and all that stuff, you're going to end up in the second apron.
Yeah,
you're not going to be able to replace those guys. And both of them have like matched chemistry with Jokić. Like, the only people that match the chemistry with Jokić that you can assume across the league are each other and maybe MPJ. And like, obviously guys look great next to Jokić, and whoever they would bring in as replacements would probably look good next to Jokić, but you're not going to get players of the same level. And it would be a terrible look to let them walk. Because if Aaron Gordon hits free agency, he probably gets a shit ton of money from someone else. And are the Nuggets going to pay that? But like, history says no at this point. If Jamal Murray hits free agency, like, if the Pistons have a shit ton of cap, why not throw it at Jamal Murray? You know, like, free agents aren't great these days. Like, people don't typically hit free agency.
Yeah.
Paul George, 35-year-old Paul George is the best free agent we've had, like, probably this decade, potentially. You know, like, it's very rare that guys hit free agency now. And so when they do and teams have salary cap, even the best ones are going to get a ton of money. Fred VanVleet got $40 million. Jamal Murray can definitely get more than $40 million from a team in free agency. Will it be a max? I don't know.
That's a really good point about Fred VanVleet, because of the new salary floor, right? That's the other dimension of this new CBA, is that, you know, it's harder for some teams to spend money, but they also are forcing other teams to spend a certain amount of money. And so you're, you know, taking a risk when you, let somebody get to free agency, unrestricted free agency anyway.
Yeah, and it's just like, look, Jamal Murray has earned that from Denver. I know he wasn't great in the playoff run, but this was probably when he played the best regular season of his career. Like, he played very well when he was healthy.
Yeah.
And I know that there are questions about his health, but like, outside of this season, he hasn't really struggled with health besides the torn ACL. And like, even if he plays only 60 games, guess what? He's probably playing a better 60 games than anyone else you're going to replace him with. Like, are all-star level guards better than Jamal? Probably, but also, are they going to come to Denver? No, you don't have the assets to get them.
Yeah.
And you're not going to find a better one in free agency in all likelihood. Is Jamal worth more to Denver than he would be to other teams? Absolutely. Does he get a max from other teams? Maybe not. But does Denver need to give him that? Yes. You're not going to find better than Jamal Murray. And like, the Olympics looked rough. Yeah. The playoffs, rough. Yeah. Is this probably a trend going forward? I don't know. But do you need to take that shot of paying him a max? Yes, because you're not going to find a better second option in free agency. And you're not going to be able to replace him, because guess what? Calvin Booth has emptied the war chest. You don't have assets. Your most tradable contract is Zeke Naji, and you probably have to attach a pick to get off of him. So you
Most
look at
tradable.
that. Yeah, like as far as in terms of matching salaries. And like Aaron Gordon is incredibly important to this team. If they let him walk, you're not going to replace Aaron Gordon.
We didn't get to comment on this during our Olympic show, but I was like texting Will during the Olympics that like, man, if Team Serbia had Aaron Gordon, someone who could catch a lob, like he's such a perfect 4 next to Jokić because of that. Not just the lob catching, but how he just knows like where to be on the floor and all of this, like the chemistry between those guys is, it has such a high. It raises the ceiling in the team in such subtle ways. Like I think that it would be a mistake to let him go as well. Asher, we talked a bit about all the young guys, right? The Nuggets are going with this youth movement now. And you wrote an article comparing the Nuggets to certain parts of the Spurs dynasty, which the Nuggets, various people in the Nuggets organization have compared what they're trying to do to what the Spurs were able to do in creating such a long championship window for themselves. And I wanted to give you the opportunity to expound on, the main point of that article, which is to answer the question, are the Nuggets too young?
Yeah, I think they are. Because if you looked at a lot of the average ages of the Spurs dynasty, which, by the way, I didn't like, that's not something I'm pulling out of my ass. Like, that's something that has been compared beforehand. I don't think aiming for a Spurs-like dynasty is realistic for any team, really. But that's what Calvin said. He's like, we want to win 2 and 4. We want to win 3 and 6, 4 and 8. So I went and I looked at the most like comparable team to that formula, and that was the Spurs. They won 5 across 20 years. And the average age across most of those rosters was 28, 29, 30. And in terms of NBA experience, because even the Nuggets average age, which I think has gone up since Russ, but at the time of me making that article, it was like 25, 26, something like that.
I have it here, what it is since the Russ deal and the Dario deals have gone through, that their projected top 10, which are Jokić, Jamal, MPJ, AG, Christian, Russ, Peyton, Dario, Julian, and Zeke. Average age is 26.8 years old. The 2023 Nuggets, the top 10 were 28.1, and the 2003 Spurs was 32.5. So they were actually on the much older side.
Yeah. So obviously I don't expect them to like lean into the 30s, but like you would probably hope for like a 28, 29, or at least a lot of years of NBA experience, because nowadays a lot of guys are younger, but they have a lot of NBA experience. Devin Booker had played, I think, 7 years by the time he was 25. If you look at the 25-year-olds on the Nuggets roster, that is not the case. Jalen Pickett, I think, is 25. And guess what? He hasn't played in the NBA for 7 years. He's played in the NBA for 2. This will be his second season.
With very few, minutes in the rotation, even in those 2 years.
Yeah, so it's like, while the average age might line up a bit with some championship rosters, they're still, on average, a year or two younger than a lot of them. And they also have a lot of guys that, even if they are a little older, have little championship or little NBA experience compared to a lot of guys of similar ages that would be on championship teams in the past. So I looked at like, hey, what is the average age? What's the formula for the Spurs? It was, hey, we have our core group of guys. We're going to just, spinning door a lot of veterans in and out. And they had a couple that stuck around for a while. They had Boris Diaw, who was there for a few of the teams. They had Robert Ory there for a few of them. And then we're going to just surround them with like vet minimum guys or guys who we can get through trades. They weren't drafting very often. They got Kawhi Leonard, which is a large reason they were able to get that 5th championship. But even before Kawhi, it was 4 in however many years. It wasn't this drafting sensationally in the late 20s. It was, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to get a lot of veterans and we're going to get guys who we know we can win with. who have proven to be winners. It wasn't, hey, we're going to take a 25-year-old rookie in the second round. That wasn't really the formula there outside of, I think, Beno Udrih was a pick, but he also played overseas.
How old was Ginobili when he got drafted? Do you know?
I think he was around 20, and then he didn't come over, I think, until he was like 22, I want to say.
I see. Second greatest second-round draft pick.
Yeah, I could be wrong. It's been a while since I wrote that article, but from what I remember, that's about what his age was. Like, they did hit on a lot of guys. They got lucky with hitting on Tony Parker. They got lucky with hitting on Manu Ginobili. But also, the Nuggets have their core group of guys. You don't need to hit on a third big three. You need to surround them with good role players. And that's not exactly what they're doing right now. So, like,
it's interesting that they're trying to... I don't think a lot of teams try to find their role players through the draft is the thing.
No.
Yeah.
Right. They try to find their stars. That's this thing that we've been talking about for the last few years about like drafting for upside versus drafting for like fit role players, whatever. We hit on Christian Braun. That's kind of like where, at least within Nuggets fans, this conversation was kind of sparked. Will, what were you going to say about that?
Nothing. Just like that's this new, like, I feel like the front office is trying to convince everyone that it's this new like wave strategy that's going to be like the new thing moving forward with contenders is.
Well, that's the thing is I think more teams are doing that. We've seen that in the last couple of drafts as like, I think not just Calvin, but other GMs were trying to, make a bit of a transition in their thinking about this in anticipation of the new CBA, but it's hard to hit on those picks, right?
Yeah. And another thing that is with like a lot of the two timeline teams, if you look at the Mavs, they drafted Derek Lively. Derek Lively was great for them. Look at where they drafted him. 11th overall, I think it was. Look at where the Nuggets have been drafting.
Yeah.
Deron Holmes is like the highest overall pick that they've made of this window.
I think
he was like
wasn't
23.
Christian
or Christian,
21?
Yeah, Christian was 21. But they haven't made a pick in the teens in the top 10.
Yeah.
And you could have traded up in this draft probably to get a guy. And they did. They got Deron, which I think is a good process. But if you're going to do this two timeline thing, get good young guys, please. Get guys who you know will at least have a higher upside of hitting than a Jalen Pickett, than a Hunter Tyson. Get guys, trade up, do something. If you're going to insist on doing this two timeline thing like they have, get guys who are high upside and can also compete right now. Like, if they could have traded up to get a Reed Shepherd, Reed would have helped this window a ton.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like I don't
finally have a backup point guard.
Yeah, I don't think I don't
know what we could have traded to go all the way up to, what was he, third?
I don't think that you have the assets to get him, but like Tim Connolly traded up to get Rob Dillingham, and that wasn't too expensive of a trade for them to make.
Or like, I don't know how Isaiah Collier like felt it.
Yeah, or trade up from Utah. Or also, you probably don't even have to trade up to get Day'Ron if you don't let it leak like 3 months beforehand. Hey, guys, neon sign. Hey, we want to draft Day'Ron. By the way, look at Day'Ron Holmes. We want to draft him. And you're constantly churning that for like 3 months before the draft. If you don't do that, maybe you don't have to trade up for him.
De'Ron was all anyone was talking about for the Nuggets. And so it was sort of a new thing that happened. Not that information doesn't leak out, but that it becomes so like focused, like a rumor just becomes like effectively fact, because practically every mock draft had Durant going to the Nuggets because everyone just assumed that this promise happened and all of that. So what I wanted to talk about next are actually in particular the first round picks that Calvin has made. I think it's pretty clear that all of them at least have potential to be NBA players. Will, when we did our NBA awards show, you were making a really passionate point about how Executive of the Year doesn't really reward drafting because it only rewards sort of short-term moves, because drafting doesn't usually have an immediate payoff. We talked about some of the misses in the draft that Calvin has had, but there are some hits with a question mark just in terms of like, what is it that we're expecting from these guys? And the first one I want to talk about was actually Julian, because, you talked about how he was an inconsistent shooter last season, but we saw a lot of really good stuff from him last year in terms of how he fit into the offense. Largely just looked like he fit on the floor, which is not necessarily what you see from most rookies, even the good ones.
Mhm.
So my question is that if Julian stays healthy last year and basically just gives you what he did last season, inconsistent shot and all, is it enough to call him a hit? And is it enough to contribute positively, at least in terms of regular season impact?
I think if he stayed healthy, he probably ends up shooting around 30, mid-30s probably from three. And I do think he's a bit
On volume,
better.
right? Because he puts those boys up.
Oh yeah, he's basically mini MPJ. Where like if he gets the ball, probably ending with a shot. And I don't feel like his 29% or 29% that he shot is accurate of his shooting, because I think a lot of that came after an ankle injury, and it's hard to be consistent in an inconsistent role. And he didn't have a very consistent role, so it's hard to get all these shots up and have them go in if you're touching the floor once every like 3 games. If you're getting a shot once every 4 games, and he didn't get a ton of minutes after he got injured. Not that I blame Malone for that. He wasn't playing well enough to justify the minutes, which is, just as a quick aside, Malone not playing the young guys is complete horseshit. He plays the young guys if they deserve it. But back to the point of, I think Julian will be good this season. I don't think he's going to miss a ton of time, hopefully. And I think if he gets those minutes, just the way he shoots, the volume he shoots at, all the indicators, like the floater touch indicators, tell you he's a better shooter than 29%. Do I think he's going to be a 45% shooter? No. But I do think he'll be like probably mid to high 30s on good volume relative to his minutes. So I think those are fairly, reasonable expectations to have of like good volume shooter who can also do some attacking off closeouts, can get a floater up every now and again.
Would it be enough for next season?
I don't know. I really have a hard time seeing which way it'll go, because he was so inconsistent in his first year that I just don't know if he'll hammer out those finer details in his game enough to like really contribute at a high level, or at even a good level in his first year. I think he'll have to, though. I think like he'll get minutes regardless, because like who is the back Nuggets third string 2 guard? Hunter Tyson?
Or even just wings in general, right? We had so many wings last season, and now we have maybe like just enough wings if nothing goes poorly.
Entirely wrong.
No injuries or anything like that, right? All right, so Christian shot 38% from 3 last season, but on very low volume. He's obviously coming off the bench, so that volume is going to be what it is. But he hesitates a lot on his shots, and I don't necessarily expect him to shoot on the same volume that KCP did, which wasn't high to start with, a little over 4 attempts per game. But if Christian Braun shoots 37% on around 3.2 3-point attempts per game, not quite doubling his volume, but times around 1.5. All else being equal with his game, the hustle, the defense, the rebounding, would that be enough for him to prove himself as a starter caliber player on this team that is trying to contend for a title?
I don't think so. I think he'd need to be at least at 38 on like 3.5 attempts a game. Like KCP wasn't a high level volume shooter, but you knew that he had no problem shooting it and it would probably go in. Whereas Christian, a lot of that was above the break threes. He was really bad at corner threes. I think
the corners were tough.
1% or something like that on corner threes.
Yeah.
And a lot of the Nuggets offense requires guys in both corners, and he is going to have to learn to shoot from a corner. I don't know if I buy the 38%. I think that might be because of the low volume. Like, I think if he increases the volume, which it likely will, just because more opportunity, I think that's probably going to go down to around 33%, if I had to guess. And he hesitates way too much right now. Like, he needs to get that out of his game. But that was there when he was in college. Like, that was one thing that I noted in the scouting report. I think I did. I think that's still on Stiffs. But he hesitated a lot shooting. Like, he shot a good percentage in college, but he would pass up open shots all the time. And he could be pretty timid when it came to shot selection. And that's translated to the NBA. I just don't know if he will be a starter level player, because I think he's pretty far from being one, at least of this team. I think if he was a starter for, but I don't think
so
he gets
you're
near the
basically
caliber.
so Christian's timidity with his shot selection actually also contributes to his floor, because he's not taking really any bad shots, right? Like, we want him to take a few more like slightly uncomfortable shots. Like, I can't even picture a bad shot that Christian took that season, which is kind of a problem when you're a starter, because there are some moments where you have to be able to take risks or just make a play. He's more likely to kind of toss Jokić or Jamal a grenade near the end of a possession when he's got sort of a semi-contested situation going on. And part of the reason that he gets into those situations is that he does hesitate so much. So I'm almost wondering if, is it the hesitation, or is it the hesitation, or the fact that the hesitation doesn't even end in like action on his part? He's usually like, okay, I'm passing out, like, I'm deferring here.
Yeah.
I do think that confidence is really his biggest issue on offense right now. But the second biggest issue is the finishing. His rookie year, he shot 60% at the rim, and it was down to, or 68%, and it was down to 59% in his second season. And I'm not really sure why. Do you have any theory on that, and a prediction for like where it will end up in his third year?
I don't know exactly why. It just didn't seem to go in as much. Like, he didn't dunk it as much this season, I feel like, as he did in his rookie year. Which I could be wrong on that. That's just
was it just like transition opportunities, do you think, or was
I'm not sure.
Something in the half court, how he's being guarded? Because he was playing off the bench both years.
Yeah, I think it's probably both of those things, because I think a lot of his scoring came from transition last year. And as we noted, transition offense had a huge fall off this season, which I think that probably contributed some. But also, like, he probably got higher on the scouting report this year than he was in his rookie year. And they were probably like, hey, can't shoot, tag off of him, make him shoot, let him try those. And when that happens, you're going to be going into a more packed paint. And he's never exactly been a finesse finisher. So he's not going to be hitting like runners and floaters over guys in the paint. He's trying to either slam it home or just comes up point blank on a layup.
Yeah, my like speculation in terms of that question was that some of the messaging or the like coaching towards CB might have been towards evolving other areas of his game, like his shot specifically, the jump shot or the 3-point shot. Because I think he kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit last season, which to that point, we can shift to Peyton Watson, since theoretically, if Christian's the starter and Peyton's coming off the bench, those two are being split up rotationally a little bit, at least more than they have been last season. And we had CT on the show and others who have commented that splitting them up might be good because they're a little bit redundant in their skill sets that they provide. But like Christian Braun, Peyton's also going to have to up his offensive game, because it's really what might make or break role players, especially with contending aspirations. So where do you stand on Peyton right now? And do you see more offensive opportunities like him slashing or being a second side attacker, his shot, things of that nature?
Yeah, I'm high on Peyton long term. I think if you're going to bet on anyone developing like well past what they are right now, it's probably Peyton, because like Christian, I think, can get better, but I think he is kind of what he is, right? Like, I don't think he's ever going to fulfill a higher role than like a fifth starter. I think his ceiling is like being a good fifth starter, which is possible. I'm not ruling that out, but I think Peyton has a higher ceiling than that. So like if you're trying to say, oh, this person is going to develop into something that can help carry the dynasty forward, or hopeful dynasty forward, it would probably be Peyton. Does that happen? Is that likely? Probably not, but it is possible. So I think you see a higher volume of ball handling opportunities for him this year. I think he shot 43% on mid-range shots this year, or like short mid-range shots. And a lot of those were, him attacking off closeout, pull up. So I do like a lot of what Peyton provided as far as ball handling, as far as playmaking. I think he had a lot of good passes last season. And I think putting him in a lineup with hopefully more spacing will free up some of those opportunities for him. Like if he's the first sub off the bench for Christian, that's a lineup in which there's more spacing. The thing with that is that there's not a lot of lineups with a ton of spacing right now. Because like our backup point guard is Russ, and Russ is not a shooter. And then like Zeke is not a shooter. So if you were playing hypothetically like a Jamal Murray, Julian Strawther, Peyton Watson, Vlatko or MPJ, Saric lineup, then he could potentially have some ball handling there, slashing to the rim, and not have as packed of a paint, because he needs to improve on his finishing. But that's something that he has, at least eye test wise. I forget what the stats say, but he looks a little more confident finishing this year than he did in his rookie season.
Maybe a little too confident. Like sometimes I want him to just like simple layup or simple dunk instead of trying to like tomahawk in traffic.
Yeah, for sure. But I think if you're going to bet on anyone developing, like taking a huge leap from last year to this year, I think it will be Peyton. Like I wouldn't be shocked if he came in and shot 33% from three on like middling volume and provided really good defense. And then like how many points did he average last season? Like 6, 7, something like that, right? Maybe he gets that up to like 8.5. I think that would be a pretty sizable jump for the Nuggets. So yeah, if he can take a jump shooting wise, I think he proves to be a playable playoff player this year, which is a huge jump from last year where he wasn't really playable in the playoffs.
For the backup point guard position, we obviously signed Russ. Mm-hmm. There's Trey Alexander on the roster, which is exciting. A lot of fans because of Summer League showing. But if he is getting a lot of rotation minutes, is that a sign that something catastrophically bad has occurred?
If Trey gets a lot of minutes, something bad happened.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, he looked really good at Summer League, but Summer League is Summer League. Like, I never really take too much stock unless people look really bad at Summer League. I think looking bad at Summer League is more indicative than looking great at Summer League, because Summer League is very, very good for people of Trey Alexander's archetype, where they're mainly scorers, they're mainly quote-unquote hoopers, like these guys who just put up shots and create, and were like really good at that in college, because a lot of these guys are the competition they were facing in college, and it's different than playing at an NBA level. And I think Trey has a future as an NBA player, but I would not bet on that this season, like at all. If he gets significant playing time, it means either A, he is way better than any of us ever thought, and he is really good and earned those minutes, or B, someone got hurt, probably Jamal. Like, that really wouldn't be good. Like if he plays a significant amount of time and it's not like because he's this wild undrafted free agent success, the Nuggets aren't winning a title in all likelihood because something bad probably happened.
This has been our, Denver Nuggets offseason, evaluation basically. But, we wanted to put the Denver Nuggets offseason in the context of other sort of contending teams, or at least playoff teams. So let's move on to our offseason tier list, where we are going to be grading all of the projected playoff teams on their offseason. So
let's start with an easy one, the Thunder.
Okay.
I feel like theirs is pretty solidly S tier.
Yeah, it doesn't get much better than
Giddy for Caruso.
Exchanging roles for potentially better fits and filling some needs.
I do have a question about the Thunder for you, Asher. Do you think that, not to say that like Giddy was like the best fit for this, but in trading Giddy for Caruso, they didn't really replace Giddey's playmaking value on that team. And we did see in that Mavs series that when the Thunder, had to take Giddey out of the starting lineup, there was a clear, drop off in like ball movement, and Shea had to take on a much bigger ball handling burden. Do you think that that's going to, the fact that they didn't replace that in any way this offseason, they have Jokić, but he's going to be out this year with the ACL. Is that going to hinder their progression as a team at all this season?
No, I don't think Giddey was actually that good of a playmaker. I think he's just like a guy who could pass, and they didn't have like a ton of those guys, I guess. But like J-Dub is a good playmaker. Shea is a good playmaker. Isaiah Hartenstein is a good playmaker, especially for a center. Like they have guys.
Some of that burden off.
Yeah, like also Giddey was probably the worst rotation player in the playoffs last year. Literally anytime they subbed him in, the Mavs or Pelicans would go on a run. Anytime they subbed him out, the Thunder would go on a run. So like it was basically dictated. Are you winning the series? Are you playing Josh Giddey? Yes, then you're not winning. If you're not playing Josh Giddey, you're winning. So like
until they got to the Mavs.
Well, no, Giddey, like whenever he was subbed on, Mavs would go on huge runs, and like
I think that had more to do with whether Lively was on the floor or not.
Maybe, but Giddey is just a detriment to any good basketball. So I think getting rid of him in itself, even if you just traded him for a second round pick, would have helped this team, let alone trading him for Alex Caruso.
Yeah, there was like some situational, like just matchups where you were debating how you were going to play Giddey. Like that was a topic for them all playoffs. So
for sure,
I'm trying to see. Well, I guess
you should pick your favorite team, the Golden State Warriors.
Okay, let's go with the Warriors.
You don't have to do that.
The Warriors, obviously, they traded. Is there an F tier? No, I don't know. Where would I put them, honestly?
So they lost Klay Thompson, right? Well, they managed to get a sign and trade done with the Mavs, but they didn't get like a ton back in that deal. But they got off of his money, let them get under the first apron. I think they were under the luxury tax for a time, but now they're just under the first apron. They were able to get Buddy Hield, right, with their mid-level exception. Is that right?
Yep.
And then they got DeAnthony Melton as well.
Yep.
And
DeAnthony Melton was the mid-level. Buddy Hield was through a sign and trade, if I remember correctly.
Was a sign and trade with Philly. That's right.
And then they also got Kyle Anderson.
That's right.
I mean, I was on
kind of their backup Draymond.
Yeah, I was on the train of they needed to move off of the original core and really try to upgrade around Steph. And I'm not a big Kyle Anderson fan. I think DeAnthony Melton can be okay. And then Hield, I think it's fine. I guess if he can shoot, that's what they want. Have him in C right now, but do you want to push him up to somewhere?
No, because they're wasting Steph, like the tail end of Steph's, I don't know, prime. Like I don't know how to talk about the primes of these like old guys that are still just like lightning on any given night.
Buddy Hield is a fine replacement for 2023 Klay Thompson. It's not prime Klay Thompson. His defense was shit anyways, so like replacing him with another shit defender but a really good shooter, it'll probably be fine.
Who fits into their system, right? Because there probably isn't a better, like if you're gonna pick a bargain Klay replacement, but he's probably as good as it gets to fit into the Golden State Warriors system because he knows how to play in a react offense, probably, right?
Yeah, and then the thing about DeAnthony Melton is his back is fucked. Like he has a bad history of back injuries. He's pretty injury prone in general. When he plays, he's pretty good, but like I don't know how much he'll actually end up playing. And then Kyle Anderson is bad. Kyle Anderson is just an actively bad player. He provides all the negatives that Draymond does without providing any of the positives that Draymond has. He's not a particularly great defender. He's like a solid enough defender. Like he's not a bad defender, but he's not anywhere close to the level Draymond is. And then his shot is somehow uglier than Draymond's, way slower. And he doesn't provide the playmaking that Draymond does. He's like
I think he provides the playmaking that Draymond does.
I mean, he provides playmaking, but not to the level Draymond does.
Yeah,
Draymond is a
He was
very,
effectively
very
the
good.
Wolves' backup point guard last year.
Yeah, but like Draymond is a very, very good playmaker. Kyle Anderson is Kyle Anderson.
Yeah.
If you listen to Wolves fans during the Nuggets series, they would have you believe Kyle Anderson played great defense on Jokić. So
They did. I thought Wolves fans were complaining about slow-mo like all of last season.
They were.
So.
They were.
yeah, but there was after game 2 or something when the Nuggets completely melted down, they were like, Kyle Anderson, good job. Anyway, let's go into the Mavs then, since they're the ones who got Clay.
Yeah, let's talk about the Mavs. I actually think they had an A-tier offseason in well, I'm gonna give them an A. We can argue this, but so they lost Derrick Jones Jr. They didn't re-sign him. Basically, they had the option to, but they ended up going with Najee Marshall, using their mid-level exception to get him instead. They effectively replaced Tim Hardaway Jr. with Klay Thompson, which, given where both of those guys were defensively, I think is actually an upgrade defensively off of last season, but not by a lot. And then offensively, another guy who can catch and shoot, a guy who's probably going to command quite a bit more gravity than Tim Hardaway Jr. And is a bit more consistent as a shooter. They take the same kinds of ridiculous shots. So we're going to see, how that works out with Klay Thompson next season. I don't quite know how to grade, how to incorporate like the moves they made at the trade deadline. Because they weren't during the season. They were obviously home runs. The only thing keeping this from an S for me is, I don't know, maybe it's just like Mavs bias or something, but I have to give them an A because I think that everything they did was a straightforward upgrade, and they're not going to have a ton of questions about like how they play next season. It's really more, can they keep up like the pace that they did, say, post-trade deadline, particularly defensively? I actually have more questions about their offense, or I did post-trade deadline, so I'm curious if they're able to kind of get it back up to where that offensive ceiling was throughout most of the rest of the season before they put a lot more emphasis on these more defensively oriented pieces. But what do you guys think of that?
I disagree pretty heavily on how good this offseason was. I would probably have them in C tier. I don't like the Klay signing really because I assume he's going to be the starter at the 3 rather than Najee Marshall.
Interesting. That would
be, or at least he's closing games because they gave him a lot of money, and also Klay has fairly sizable like pride from what I can glean. I don't think he would accept a like bench role,
6-man role.
That's probably why he left the Warriors, because the Warriors didn't want to give him like they started playing pods over him. So if that's the case,
too late, might I?
if that's the case, may I ask, who the fuck are they guarding? Because they will be starting Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic, and Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson is a bad defender. Their point of attack guy is PJ Washington in that lineup. And PJ is like good on forwards. He should not be your point of attack guy. And then like Najee Marshall, I like Najee Marshall. I don't think they're a bad team or anything, but I don't think they got better. I think they got worse probably because of the Klay Thompson signing and like what that means probably for their rotations. And then if he gets benched, their locker room.
Yeah.
You make a good point about if he's starting or coming off the bench. Well, I know you have very specific Klay Thompson thoughts, so why don't you chime in?
Well, I was low on it too. I was like, Klay is almost out of the league. Like, I'm sorry. Like, his 3-point shot, I guess, can still be good. I'm definitely underrating him on that, but I was like ready to just be done with Klay as a player.
I think is that he can't make a shot from like anywhere else. Like whenever you ran him off the line, I'm like, is he gonna finish this at the rim? I don't think so. Is he gonna make this midi? I don't think so. So when you don't trap, because he's actually good at like passing out of those traps to the big or whatever it is off a DHO or coming off a pin down. But if you don't do that, it looks really rough. And the defense is just like we've talked about how relentlessly Mike Brown was targeting Klay Thompson in that play-in game between the Kings and the Warriors a lot. Yeah. So if he is starting, this actually could go really south really fast.
Yeah, my number one concern with the Mavs was their defense, and just like Klay's not cutting it, and Najee Marshall can kind of replace Derrick Jones Jr., but I really liked how he played on defense, and so it's like they're just
I
kind
think
of
Najee Marshall's a little bit
tangentially.
more versatile because of the size. But if he's not starting and he's not getting an opportunity to be the primary on all those assignments, okay, I'll downgrade it to B.
Let's
We'll
just
take the
we'll just
compromise
put it in
here.
B because it kind of depends on some of their decisions and how
Right.
bad or good
Sure.
Clay is.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to make Asher rate the Milwaukee Bucks offseason.
Let's see. They signed
Torian Prince.
Gary
DeLon
Trent, DeLon Wright.
Oh, yeah, and Gary Trent. A bunch of like wingy shooting guards.
Probably B. I think they got better on the margins, but also I really think they screwed up the draft. I don't get the AJ Johnson pick at all.
Yeah.
And John Horst has never been a good drafter. So like, yeah, I think they got better role players. I think that people are overrating Gary Trent. I don't think Gary Trent is actually that good. But DeLon Wright is a good addition. I think Gary Trent does add shooting, but he's basically just a Malik Beasley replacement. And then Torian Prince is like good if you're playing the Nuggets, and then he's fine everywhere else. He's like he's a fine like regular season innings eater forward.
Yeah, no, I pretty much agree with that. I think especially like if you're grading them on a curve, given the limit, like they could only sign minimums. Like these were the tools that they had. They had minimums in the draft. They draft big fat question mark. I don't really get it, but the minimums I think all kind of helped them, especially because the role players they had, particularly on the wing, were not great. Although I like Malik Beasley's arguably at least as good as all the guys that they signed. So not just retaining him was maybe like, I don't know. Maybe they're just like we just know that the Dame Malik backcourt doesn't work, so we have to change this up. Okay. Will do the Clippers.
I mean, the Clippers, I'm gonna go, oh man, like D or C. Because I mean, look, like as you can speculate about Paul George and where he's at, but like just letting him go for nothing, I think looks bad on them as an organization. It's not the moves you want to make. But I wanted the PG and Kawhi thing to end. I think that was the end of that road. It's just a matter of like what can they really do to go forward, and they definitely dodged the second apron, which is cool. I don't know.
Well, they were in it already. They'd been in it for I think 2 seasons. Or not 2 seasons because it didn't exist before last, but they effectively were a second apron team the year before. And last year they had gotten rid of Eric Gordon, which saved like $50 million in luxury taxes. They were paying more in luxury tax than on his contract.
Yeah, it was like 50-60 million.
Yeah. So they also signed Chris Dunn. They signed Derrick Jones Jr. with their mid-level exception.
Yeah, I mean,
did they draft anybody?
They were kind of in a hard place with Paul George.
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys see it. Wasn't there like some kind of trade they were maybe going to make with Golden State with PG or something?
They were in talks, but I think they just didn't want to take on like Wiggins' contract, which can you blame them? And then it was like they wanted one of Pods or Kuminga, I think it was, and the Warriors just didn't want to part with any of their young guys. At a certain point, you're like, would you rather have Andrew Wiggins or would you rather have nothing? And then, well, also I think they were offered Wiggins, Moody, like a pick. So I probably would have taken that if I were them, because you need all the picks you can get if you're LA.
Yeah.
But also, they're just going to be stuck in no man's land for the next couple of seasons. They have Kawhi, they have Harden, they have a bunch of guys. They don't have any young talent really to speak of.
Right, and they re-signed Batum. That was the other. I knew they had one more defensive.
Yeah, and they also became a prison yard basketball team with a lot of the signings they made.
It's hard to know because this seems like kind of like a future forward thing, I guess. It's like they now have to go a new direction, which is going to take some time. I don't expect them to be like contending. I see them as kind of like a play-in team right now, at least.
I don't even know if they make the play-in.
Yeah, maybe they don't even make that.
We'll see. It depends on Kawhi's health. I don't know how much worse they're going to be if a miracle happens and Kawhi's healthy the entire season, kind of thing.
I think still pretty significantly worse. They lost Paul George for nothing. They didn't replace him with really anything.
Nope, just Chris Dunn, who was someone that's floated around for the Nuggets too.
Yep, CT Fazio special.
C. I think C is fine because losing Paul George for nothing, you can't get much higher than that. But I do think that every other thing they did was like fine. Like I think they've got a bunch of like role players.
All right, well, let's go with the team that got KCP and just go, PG. The team that got PG was the
Freudian
Sixers.
slip.
So,
all right,
just go to
Philadelphia
them.
76ers. I'm going to give them an A. They got Paul George, got Embiid, another kind of 2A, 2B kind of guy, depending on how you see current Paul George. They got him a backup center. They got Caleb Martin, so now they have a real kind of defensive wing. The reason this isn't an S actually is because I think that Caleb Martin is the best defender on. Well, Paul George is the best defender on that team, but I don't think he's going to be taking on the primary assignments, and also
What about
you don't want to
Embiid?
put that kind of stress on him. I mean perimeter.
Okay.
Perimeter defender, and they still don't believe in like defensive, like real like high level defensive wings and forwards, as they haven't for the last couple of seasons. Caleb Martin is a question mark, and even with him, like, he's not really a 4. He just like isn't a super high level shooter, and so he was playing a 4 for the Miami Heat. Also, they didn't have other bigs, but they did let him go. So I'm gonna give them an A because I think they did pretty much as good as they could. Besides getting KCP, I think that would have been, really nice to have next to Tyrese Maxey. But given the size that they added in the backcourt, like they have the option of like a Maxey and Paul George backcourt, instead of making PG necessarily play small forward all the time. They also got Reggie Jackson after he got bought out by the Hornets, right? And they retained Kyle Lowry as well, Philadelphia kid. So they have a couple of legitimate backup point guard options as well. But there's still just big question marks about this team because of really the top end stars, but also I think there are some defensive holes that teams in the East in particular can take advantage of. Yeah, so I'm gonna give them an A. What do you guys think?
I'd probably give them an S. I think they got the best free agent available. I think they got a lot of good depth pieces. I think Caleb Martin is someone who is really good, especially for the money they got him at. Andre Drummond, I think, is one of the best backup centers in the league. I think Jared McCain is going to be a home run of a draft pick. I think he's going to be really good for them. They managed to retain Kyle Lowry and Kelly Oubre, who Kelly Oubre was pretty good for them last year. They did literally everything you could do, I think, to surround Embiid with good talent. They got, in my opinion, the most scalable star in the league. If you need him to be basically KCP plus, he can do that for you. If you need him to be a shot creator,
you're talking about Paul George.
Yeah. He can do that for you. So I think the talent that they gave them to work with is probably the best they could have done. And if you do the best possible case, I think that has to be an S tier.
It is hard. It's hard to pick between S and A for sure.
Well, you have to because you're the deciding vote here.
I say we leave him an S because it's like you got a big free agent signing, which is kind of rare these days. Whether you could argue they should have gone like the KCP role player 3-and-D route and then like have another extra option to add something. But they retained the players they wanted to retain. They kind of went off the players they didn't want to have anymore. They did a sign-in trade. Like a lot of these moves are kind of rare now for what's happening in the NBA. So I think we could give them an S for just like the off season, like as far as just what you're doing. And maybe it doesn't work out the way they see it, but which is probably to win a championship and compete with the Celtics, but that remains to be seen.
One more thing I'd like to add is that they retained all their draft picks for the future, so they can still pivot and trade for guys if they need to.
For sure.
Right. I was worried about whether they'd be able to get quality players in free agency in particular because we didn't know what Paul George was going to do, and whether they'd have to expend some draft capital to sort of do like a sign and trade type deals or whatever, just to pry players away from other teams because they didn't have players to trade, right? But one more argument actually in favor of that for Philly is that they retained good relations with Tyrese Maxey despite having to make him wait to get his full contract extension. And he took the 5-year rookie max deal without the player option on the 5th year. So it's just a straight 5-year deal, which is the best case scenario for that team given the caliber of player that he is. And the salary cap situation. Another one where I'm like, hey, agent, how did you not get this guy a player option given where the salary cap is going to be in the next few years. Just these guys are starting to annoy me. Asher, why don't you do the Cleveland Cavaliers, who actually still have a big question mark with Isaac Okoro?
Yeah, I don't.
Signed
They
in
didn't
restricted
really.
free agency.
They didn't really do much from what I remember. Because
So
didn't they not
they extended
sign
Donovan Mitchell.
yeah, which is good. I just don't think they did a ton from what I remember. Like
Yeah.
B tier, I guess. Like they didn't. They were one of the teams that didn't sign anybody for a long time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But like keeping
I
Donovan
don't
Mitchell in
think they
town.
did.
Yeah, keeping Donovan Mitchell in town is big for them. I don't remember if they drafted anybody. If they did, they're not coming to mind. Oh yeah, no, they got Tyson. I think Jalen Tyson, who's a really good pick. So like B tier.
Oh, that's right. That was a good pick, I think.
Yeah, they got a good draft
wing.
pick. Yeah, they got a good draft pick. Got a good extension for their star in there. So I think it has to be like B. I don't think they did anything extraordinary, but I think they did pretty good.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Well, I'm gonna give you your second favorite team, the Phoenix Suns.
Oh, okay.
You
That's a
can talk about
sarcastic
Tyus
favorite.
Jones.
Oh yeah, man. So yeah, what their moves were? They
got Tyus Jones.
They signed a
Tyus
bunch
Jones.
of ex-Nuggets and Tyus Jones.
Oh, yeah, Monte
Yeah.
Morris,
Mason Plumlee.
Yeah.
They drafted Tyler
Kolek.
Tyler
Oh, yeah,
Kolek.
No, they did not
totally.
get Tyler Kolek. So
No, that was the Knicks.
they traded back, and then I think they traded out of the first round after they traded back with us, if I recall correctly. And then the Knicks picked Tyler Kolek early in the second round, so Phoenix did not get him. And that made me happy.
I don't like the idea of having these tiny guards on their team like Monte and Tyus Jones. I get it in theory that Tyus Jones is gonna be a good orchestrator and limit the turnovers for them and set up the offense and all that, but I still would rather them like get more defensively sound because they just have nothing. And so as far as like I would put them lower, but because of the Tyus Jones effect, who I'm not even that high on, I would put him in C because I just am not that big of a fan. They got what
Ryan
Dunn.
Ryan Dunn. Yeah, that's who I looked it up. It was Ryan Dunn.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So they used that pick.
Who's sort of the Peyton Watson of this draft, where he's a really good defender and not much offensively, and like really good athlete. I don't think he's going to be as good offensively as Peyton is, though.
They also signed, re-signed Josh Okogie on this deal was created to be traded, $8 million contract, not a 4-year deal, but I believe it's a team option in the second year. And then they retained Royce O'Neal also on
$18 million a season.
Okay, so that's a 4-year guaranteed deal, averaging around $11 million a season, and that was because they need to retain him.
Yeah,
but I don't think that you can argue that their bench, their supporting cast didn't get better because it was just god awful last season.
Yeah, it definitely got better, but I also got Royce O'Neal and Grayson Allen's contracts mixed up. That's where the 18 mil is coming from. But Tyus Jones is good. Monte Morris is fine. Mason Plumlee is like probably not good at this point in his career. Probably C tier. Like they did get better, but like not meaningfully so enough to be like, yeah, no, they're for sure playoff team. I think they'll probably be like that 6, 7 seed, 8 seed maybe.
Yeah.
And then also they had a very healthy year from KD, and who knows if that happens again. And
yeah, he was really carrying them for that first half of the season. Yeah, so I wouldn't argue with a C, but I do think that given the tools that were available to them, like the Bucks, like it was even worse last year than the Bucks were in terms of the supporting cast, in my opinion. And I think they did about the same increase. So I would say B, but I wouldn't argue with a C.
Well, their lineup makes a lot less sense to me than the Bucks.
That's true. Yeah,
because like they're starting Tyus Jones, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker. With like KD, like who's going to be the point of attack defender there? Booker, but you don't want to like have him.
Tyus Jones.
Yeah, it's going to be Tyus Jones, Bradley Beal. Like you don't want to put too much on Devin Booker's plate. And
they had Bradley Beal as the primary on Ant in the playoffs. So.
Yeah, which is just insane to me. So it's like they're the most like pointless team in the league right now. I think. It's like, what are they? They're not doing anything.
Oh,
yeah.
man.
Okay. So we can leave it at C. That's the hater tax.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think could I
Yeah. Go
maybe
ahead.
suggest a team that would maybe
Yeah.
be
Go
our
ahead.
first D tier, which maybe could be
Ooh.
the Lakers.
Oh my gosh. So the Los Angeles Lakers, they were a first round exit. They were gentlemen swept by the Denver Nuggets, and they drafted Bronny James with your 55th overall pick.
Don connects.
They lost Torian Prince, and they re-signed LeBron James, and that is all they did this offseason because they don't have any roster spots or ability to do any. Was there something I missed, Asher?
Drafted Don connects.
They did draft Dalton Connect as well. So
Yeah.
who was the other player that left the Lakers then?
I think it was just
that roster
Torian
spot.
Prince. They still have D'Angelo
Cam-
Russell.
Cam
No,
Reddish was
Reddish
on
is
the
still
Lakers.
there.
Oh,
They gave all these
geez.
guys player options last year with their
Huh.
minimums. So
Yeah,
they have
he's
Christian
back.
Wood still. They have Cam Reddish still.
Spencer Dinwiddie's gone.
Spencer Dinwiddie. That's the other one.
There
Okay.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Because he went to the Mavs. That was the other one that we forgot.
Yeah, the Mavs.
Oh, yeah.
So because they were a first round exit, it didn't do anything. I have to give them a D because
I'm
what
just-
are we doing?
I'm just like,
I just don't know what they're doing.
They drafted Bronny, which does that help them sign LeBron or something? Maybe would he have signed anyways? Who knows? They did the whole Hurley watch madness. They missed out on him.
They did finally hire a head
They
coach
hired
like a week
JJ
before the
Redick.
draft.
All the
They-
rumored free agents they wanted, they didn't get. It's just like
It sounds like
it's
they
looking
don't
pretty
want to
bad.
spend. They don't want to spend 3 first round picks unless it's like an all NBA caliber player. But we're going to talk about, Mikal Bridges went for 5 first round picks. Like,
Yeah,
I
and
just
a pick
think
swap,
that
I think.
they're a bit right. 2 pick swaps, 5
Yeah.
first round picks and 2 pick swaps.
Yeah.
I'm just counting the pick swaps as fake. So even still, I just think they're kind of delusional about the market right now.
They're just giving LeBron a retirement home, and I can get that.
Yeah.
It's fine. They won a title already with LeBron. They're just gonna ride it out. Probably another year or two, and then he'll be retired, and then they'll probably trade AD and reset.
Yeah.
And manage to get a superstar because they're the Lakers.
All right, then. I'm going to throw the Knicks to Asher.
Oh, brother. B tier. I think Mikal does make them better, but I think they overpaid by a pretty significant margin for them. And also losing Isaiah Hartenstein is a big deal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Correct. It's funny because I think if they'd had the same exact offseason and then managed to retain Hartenstein, I would have actually had them as the favorites in the East.
Really?
Or at least co-favorites with the Celtics.
Okay.
Really.
Oh, wow.
Because they're so good. They were so good with once they got OG, right?
Yeah.
I think that the value that Hartenstein added to that team as a connected piece, as like another like playable center, not even like good, which he is, but another playable center when Mitchell Robinson was out, and what he could do to just give them a different look offensively, because sometimes you just have to take Mitch out to kind of break up some stagnation. The chemistry that he had with Brunson and also his defensive value is being a bit overlooked. I kind of don't see the Knicks as any better than some of the other East contenders now, even with OG, even with Mikal, because I think, I don't know, I'm not feeling the vibe as much with the Nova Knicks as I was before.
I think they're still the second best team in the East pretty clearly to me, but I do think that they're not as good as the Celtics. Like the perimeter defense between OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, like they have so many bodies to throw you, which you need when you're under Tibbs, in all fairness, but they have so many bodies that they can just throw out there that like it probably won't matter, like injury wise. And also like the center is the biggest question mark for me, and they still have Julius Randle, which it's like Julius does not fit this roster at all.
Yeah, it's funny because like the kind of player I'd want to replace Julius Randle with, there's not a better version of that archetype than Randle that isn't like LeBron or like Tatum.
Yeah, but I don't think
mismatch attacking forward, which they lack on this roster otherwise.
Yeah, but I don't think they really need that archetype. I think you just want another like really good role player.
I think they're too perimeter oriented on offense without him is the thing. Not that he's like, I think he's like
Yeah.
just the best option that they could get. Besides maybe trading for like a Karl Anthony Towns.
Yeah, I think if they did make a trade, they would probably trade for a center and have Hart run the four again. And then if you could get someone to be a Hartenstein replacement.
Asher, why don't you pick the next team for Will?
Let's go with the Grizzlies.
Edie time, baby.
Oh yeah, I have no idea how that's going to turn out, but people seem to be higher on him in the summer league.
They got Brandon Clark back. That was also mid-season. They haven't made a lot of big moves. Like I thought they would get another center, but it seems like they're just going to run with Edie and see like how that works out.
Edie is the starter there.
I just don't feel like I can put them in C because I think they're going to be like in the playoff hunt, and I don't think they did anything to get them out. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is
right.
How are you setting yourself up for the season to like get in the playoffs and compete? And I don't think they did anything to jeopardize that in the offseason. They're just like going back out there and seeing how it goes. The Edie pick could work out kind of well, but it might not.
I think he could be the Marcin Gortat to Jaws John Wall, like where he himself, in my opinion, is not a good player really, but he's big, sets really hard screens, and can roll. And Ja Morant can really help him get like easy. If he frees up driving lanes for Ja and then just rolls, that's an easy like 10 points a game for him. And he's big enough to average like 12, 13 rebounds a game. And then if you get like a block and a half a game, you're having a rookie of the year talk at that point probably.
Yeah. And Ja's a great passer. He's going to find him. So if you have somebody who can actually finish, which they didn't necessarily have with the other bigs on that team once Steven Adams went out, like.
To me, I made an Edie video where it's like, I don't believe Edie is like that good, but I'm higher on him now because he went to the Grizzlies. If he went to literally any other team, I don't think really that good of an NBA player. But now I'm like, yeah, he might be starting caliber because of Ja, basically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very
you have
true.
someone that knows how to use him. As long as he can, like, we'll see how he's able to keep up on defense at the pace of the game, all of this stuff. But, the league's getting, like, bigger.
Yeah.
They're not getting slower though, so that's still a question mark for me. But it seems like the Grizzlies are willing to run with it, and luckily for them, they have a 4 in Jaren Jackson Jr., who is an actual stretch 4. Not that his shot is super respected, but like he knows how to play like in that role, and so it's not going to be too big of an adjustment, for them, and they can finally rebound again. So
let's just go to the Nuggets. Let's just get this out of the way.
Yeah, let's get the elephant in the room. All right, the Denver Nuggets, they lost KCP. That is not great. They signed Dario Saric to a taxpayer Emily. They signed Russell Westbrook to a minimum deal, which I think is that's going to be good value. Like even if he's, mid, like I think the middle, of the range of outcomes here for Russ is still like well above the, minimum value because we need a backup ball handler. I'm going to go with a D here. So I could have graded it more harshly because at least the Lakers didn't do anything to make themselves worse besides losing Torian. But I do think the Nuggets did get worse. I do think that signing Dario Saric in particular is going to be helpful. Just having another player off the bench who can act as that hub offensively. Like we have an opportunity for the bench to at least, I don't know if they're going to be better by net rating, but they might be playing more coherent looking basketball by the eye test just because you have players on this team that are kind of Jokić ball players that can play around a player that knows how to be that hub, if nothing else. The question mark for me is what's the chemistry between Dario and Russ going to be like? But Dario knows how to set a Gortat screen too. Russ knows how to get downhill. Russ knows how to pass. That kind of thing. So I can just kind of see at least the bench working out, but what are the starters going to look like? So I'm going to go with a D here.
Yeah, if there was an F tier, I'd put him.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, where's the F here?
I think I don't know who the other teams would be, but I just want to give myself the cushion of saying top 3 worst instead of just the worst. But I think they had a top 3 worst offseason. Letting KCP walk is just awful business. It's not good. It made the team significantly worse, which like they still are a title contender. I don't want to be all doomer about it. Like they still have Jokić, they still have Murray, They still have MPJ and AG. Like those four are good enough to put you into title contention. But they went from someone who you could view as the favorites to come out of the West to like second tier contender in the West, potentially, depending on how you view the Thunder or the Wolves, all those teams. I still think they're in the mix with those teams, but I've seen some people rate them lower than those teams, and I can't exactly blame them.
You guys said it all. I think like partially too is like we're almost looking at this like a little bit in a vacuum as an offseason, like just looking at the moves that they made. How good of an offseason did the Nuggets really need, considering like these four great players that we're mentioning? Like obviously you want to have as good of an offseason as you can, but with like what you have to work with and what you can do, what is the realistic like bar you can reach? But that said, like still you're losing KCP, you're doing all these things that are just like, even just looking on paper, pretty awful.
Yeah, and also the West had an arms race this offseason, and they're the only like contender that got worse. The Thunder got significantly better. The Wolves got better. The Mavs can go either way. Like a lot of teams got just flat out better in the West, and the Nuggets are the only ones that really got flat out worse, at least among the ones that matter.
Okay, Asher. So why don't you talk about the Wolves offseason here?
They drafted pretty well. Terrence Shannon Jr. looks good. I think Rob Dillingham is good. They retained their guys. Should be good.
Basically replaced Slow-Mo with Joe Ingles, sounds like.
Yeah. And I think Slow-Mo is bad.
Traded down to get Dillingham was pretty aggressive.
Yeah. I mean, I like it. I like Dillingham.
Yeah.
I think it's like a B. I don't think they made any big enough moves to land into A, but like they'd be like a B+ in my book. Let's do the Magic, Will.
Oh God, Grace's expertise. Let's give them let's put them in C, since they don't have did not figure out their point guard. Sitch.
They didn't get one. They actually got rid of every other point guard. They're like, Jalen Suggs will play 48 minutes of point guard because they didn't re-sign Markelle Fultz. They did draft Tristan De Silva, but again,
actually, I'll give them B because they got KCP. We love him around here.
Yeah,
I think that move can only make them better. But I do think that for a team that needed another point guard, letting go of Ingles and Fultz, not getting another point guard.
I mean, neither of those players are very good, though.
Right.
There's a reason Markelle is still a free agent.
I think Ingles provided a floor for those bench minutes that.
I mean,
it's a combination of Ingles and like Mo Wagner and like those other vets off the bench.
I think they got better.
How to play.
Like they still have Cole Anthony, who's like their backup point now. Jalen Suggs is really, really good. They still have young guys who can come in and improve to help maybe address those issues, like Anthony Black, maybe if he improves there. Paolo is going to be doing most of the ball handling, though. Franz also can handle the rock. They did address the shooting a bit with KCP, which was their biggest issue, in my opinion. And then Jet Howard should come in and help with shooting as well this season. I think they'll look more cohesive offensively. I still don't think they'll be a great offense, but I think they've provided more spacing for Franz and Paolo to operate, and I think that at least deserves a B.
They were right up with the Phoenix Suns in turnover rate last season. So I think the way that you grade this depends on if you think the Orlando Magic's biggest issue offensively anyway was their shooting or the need for a playmaking point guard, a table setter.
They obviously could have used both.
Yes. And they had the resources to do both, right? They had some of the most cap space of the entire in the entire league. And they chose to use most of it on KCP. And then they retained their guys, basically. They renegotiated and extended Jonathan Isaac. They re-signed Mo Wagner. I think Ingles and Fultz were the only guys who left, right?
Yeah.
So, maybe this means more minutes for Jet Howard, like you say. I know they were in talks for like a Klay Thompson type, but then I was like, why are they doing that if they're interested in if Jet Howard is supposed to be moving into that, off the bench at least, movement shooter role, you'd think that would slot in. So yeah, I think a B is fine for me for the Orlando Magic. I just think they didn't address their biggest problem.
But they definitely didn't get worse, so I wouldn't put them in C at all.
They might have gotten worse offensively, but not by a lot. That's
I don't Fultz I love Fultz. But
It's less. It's less Fultz and more Ingles for me, honestly. Just watching all those games, he was the only one who could really settle the offense down when, particularly, Franz is off the floor.
Yeah.
And we still don't know if Franz's shot is going to come back, if that counts as like part of the off season. Like that hasn't improved clearly if you're looking at all of the Olympic performance. But
okay, so Grace, you can do the Kings.
Oh my gosh. They traded for DeMar DeRozan. They got rid of Harrison Barnes, but they got even smaller. I'm gonna give this. Oh my gosh. Just because it's DeMar DeRozan and we just don't know how he fits with other good players, I think I have to give this a C. Because it's really, they got rid of Davion Mitchell on purpose. Like, I'm not saying that was a bad thing. And it also helped them create some room, but they didn't get anything like good. Like, they replaced Davion Mitchell with Jalen McDaniels. They did draft Evan Carter.
Yeah, who's really good.
Yeah.
Having them in the same tier as the Clippers, Suns, and Warriors is whack to me. Like they're more closer to. I think. See, I would be fine if they were a C tier if our C tier wasn't Warriors, Clippers, Suns.
Yeah.
If we had an F tier, I think Lakers and Nuggets are an F tier. C tier is a D tier, and then they're in C tier because I don't think they had.
Why don't you just move them to like in between B and C?
Sure.
Well.
Okay.
Because I just don't think that I have no reason really to think they're going to win more games than they did last season.
I mean, DeMar helps them. DeMar's better than Harrison Barnes.
Is DeMar going to help them win more games next season?
Yeah. Like, DeMar in the regular season is still a very, very good player.
Is he going to look as good next to Fox and Sabonis? Like,
I think
is he going to have, or is he looking anyway, but the ball will just be in his hands more?
I think you're underestimating the fact that the person he's replacing is Harrison Barnes. He doesn't need to be like an all-star level player to have a positive impact over Harrison Barnes.
Yeah. I think maybe.
But Harrison Barnes at least fit around those other guys. Like, it's more of a fit question for me.
I think maybe we need
also Keegan Murray.
If we moved more teams into A, B might look more appropriate.
No, we're not doing that. I had a team in A, and you guys moved Philly to S. So
that's true.
I'd like to submit the Boston Celtics for an A.
Yeah, I think they kept about the same group of guys. They extended them, and they just had one of the most dominant runs we've seen in a hot minute. So yeah, no, A works fine for me.
Yeah, they extended Drew toward the end of the regular season, so I think we can kind of count that in here. That was the other thing we didn't say about the Knicks offseason, actually, and maybe you can move the Knicks to A because they got Jalen Brunson to take a massive discount and extend early. Derek White's discount wasn't quite as massive. He just extended early, and I think it's still a little bit of a discount, but not crazy. Like, I think it's more reasonable for a role player of his caliber to be like, let me capitalize on the couple of seasons I just had now, and just get that guaranteed money.
Okay.
They're convinced Al Horford to not retire, et cetera, et cetera. Like, and they're bringing back a championship core. So
let's go for the Spurs. We put them on here. We tried to put on playoff teams, projected playoff teams. Some of these teams obviously might fall out of the playoffs. But the Spurs, I mean, who knows? Maybe they had a great draft. Wemby's coming back for another season. He's going to keep developing.
Did they draft
Stephon
the UConn kid? Yeah, Stephon Castle. They traded back for him, basically, right? Or they had multiple picks in this class.
They took him at 4. They traded Rob Dillingham.
Okay. They got a bunch of they got a couple of future swaps from the Wolves, right? Because they let the Wolves trade up for them for
2031 unprotected, and then 2029, I want to say.
They got a pick and a swap. They got Chris Paul, so now they have someone who can pass Wemby the ball.
They're not running Jeremy Sohan at point.
No more Jeremy Sohan at point.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit less Trey Jones at point also. They got Harrison Barnes by participating in that sign and trade for DeMar DeRozan. That's just like, I mean, the roster was down so bad. Like, that's just upgrades with like playable players.
Yeah.
Would you give them an A then for that?
Nah. They signed playable players. That's an upgrade.
Yeah.
And also, shout out Harrison Barnes for having one of the best nicknames on Basketball Reference, the Black Falcon. That's like he has way too good of a nickname for being Harrison Barnes. But yeah, no, they were solid. Will, what do you think about the Pelicans offseason?
Well, they did get DeJounte Murray, which I feel like not a lot of people are talking about, but the Pelicans are such a weird amalgamation of talent. And I have questions about how they're going to
They don't have a
go.
starting center.
Yves Missi is probably the starting center.
He's
Yeah.
like 6'8".
No, I'm pretty
I
sure
think he's
Misi's
listed
like,
at 6'9".
Misi's 6'11".
Oh, he's listed at 6'11". Okay.
Yeah. He fits their scheme better
Keep
than
him thinking.
Val. Like B or C makes sense to me. I don't rate the DeJounte move too highly, but
they could like trade like BI or something at the deadline and then do something. I don't
and
know.
get what for BI? Like I don't think anyone's trading anything of
Yeah,
significant value for BI.
yes, that's true. Yeah, where could he go? The Lakers.
Back to LA. D'Lo, CJ, DeJounte lineups coming soon.
Yeah, there you go.
It's like LeBron and like players that LeBron would hate to play with. The Missy thing is, I guess they do see him as a starting center. Maybe they think he's going to be their Derek Lively, right?
Yeah.
Because they let Valanciunas go and didn't sign somebody else. So
Yeah.
I guess that's what they're doing.
Should we drop them
Yeah.
to see? Was it just such a lackluster and Murray
I
didn't
mean,
move the needle?
they made the DeJounte move, and I think that they did need more creation, but I thought, I just don't know. Like, this team is so weird to me.
Yeah, like DeJounte and BI have way too much overlap offensively. They're both guys who like the rock in their hands, like to shoot contested mid-range shots, and are like good playmakers, not great playmakers.
I don't think that because I don't feel like it was worse than Sacramento, so I can't put them lower. We have 3 teams that didn't actually do a ton this offseason left, so.
I actually think the Rockets are A tier.
Oh, okay. Why don't you talk about that then?
Reed Shepherd.
Right.
Nice.
Reed Shepherd. I love the Reed Shepherd signing. I think that's or not signing. I love the pick. He looks fantastic at Summer League. And then I think he's probably my favorite rookie, at least early on so far. I had him either 2 or 3 on my board. I forget which one. But like he looks someone
amazing in Summer League. And I know you said that Summer League is, whatever, unless you look bad, but I was just like, this kid looks absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, that's the exception there. And like they traded a 2nd round pick for AJ Griffin, who like I still think could be something decent. Like I like buying low on him. Like they didn't do a ton, sure, but the stuff they did do, I'm like, you know what?
It seems like they've chosen not to extend Şengün or Jalen Green.
Jalen Green, I don't think they should extend. I think this is Şengün's.
They're opting for flexibility, future flexibility.
Yeah, they also got all the Suns picks instead of the Nets picks.
That's right. Holding them hostage.
So they want to get KD, and we'll see where that gets them. But I think they had an A-tier offseason just because of Reed.
All right, then let's talk about the Miami Heat. They lost Caleb Barton for less money than it sounds like they were offering. So I don't know what the hell is going on there with those relations. I actually want to talk about them because I really liked the Kel'el Ware pick. I was kind of like, oh, I don't really understand this. Like when they first made the decision, because it's not the typical Miami Heat pick. They don't tend to draft for, upside outside of the lottery. And this was like right outside. I think it was like 16 overall, if I recall. But he looked amazing in our Summer League. And I actually think that he could start next to Bam. And I think that's, if that ends up happening, that really changes the dynamic of those lineups because they can actually have size on the floor, like real size on the floor, and maybe have a little bit more offensive juice from that front court, given how sort of anemic the backcourt is, even when they're healthy, which they are often not. They're backcourt players. So I want to give the Miami Heat it's still a C because I don't see this team being a whole lot better than they were last year. Yeah. It's just fun basketball nerd team, I think, at this point. And they didn't extend Jimmy, which I don't know how to grade that. Like, is that good or bad?
It's tense. As a basketball nerd, I don't think this is a very fun team. They didn't trade Jimmy, which I think was a mistake. They drafted Khalil Ware, which I think is a good pick, but I don't think he's going to be anything right off the bat. I think he'll be good eventually. And then they did jack and shit. They still have Tyler Hero on the roster, which I don't think they were ever going to move Tyler Hero this offseason because God, who wants that contract? But, they still have him, so that's the merit. Yeah, they just didn't do anything, really. So, I guess is fine.
Yeah, I feel like the expectations for the Heat, should be higher. Like, you got to do something. They try to make these big trades or splashes, and it's just, this is such a rut of a roster.
Yeah,
Just-
I mean, they did have a move lined up for Donovan Mitchell before he went to
right.
Cavs. It was basically done from what I'm aware, and then
When?
KD became available, and then they wanted
the year
to trade
before.
for KD.
Yeah.
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 And they tried to get on the Dame thing.
Yeah, but they legit had framework for Donovan Mitchell all squared away, and then KD became available, and they tried to go for KD.
All right, let's talk about the Indiana Pacers. Extended Pascal Siakam and
Obi Toppin.
Yeah.
Will, why don't you talk about that, actually?
I mean, I'm not a big Obi Toppin fan. I think this is an insane amount of money for Obi Toppin.
He's a fine role player.
I just sometimes see him on defense, and I'm like, he can't play defense at all. And then the next possession, he does something pretty okay on defense, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Never mind.
But he's not a great defender.
Such up and down. And but
they also got Tristan Newton.
I think.
Oh yeah, Tristan Newton.
They did.
Johnny Furphy.
Although he didn't look super impressive in summer league.
Yeah, but again, I don't.
In particular.
But I don't take summer league into account.
I know, but you said if someone looks bad, he didn't look bad, but
I don't think he looked actively bad.
Look as good as I thought he would look.
He didn't look like Jalen Pickett. That's basically my tier for does summer league matter? Jalen Pickett, yes, summer league matters. If you're above Jalen Pickett, it's the Pickett line. If you cross the Pickett line, then it matters. If you don't cross the Pickett line, it's fine.
Whoa, this terms for summer league is going to be permanently adopted just because of Jalen Pickett, the Pickett line.
August 26th, 2024, after Pickett line. I think they're B. I think they did good to re-sign Pascal. I think they had a couple
on 4 years, right? Everyone thought they would have to give 5, and they managed to do it on 4. And I think that's a win for the team, in a smaller market. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any negative thoughts on their offseason. The one thing I will say is, right before free agency started, there were some rumors that maybe the Pacers were interested in doing a sign and trade for KCP. And I actually thought that could have been he could have been for them what they thought Bruce Brown was going to be.
Yeah.
In terms of that perimeter oriented defensive anchor, who also obviously has the shooting and knows how to, play in this very offensive minded system.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. They didn't do that. Obviously they opted not to do that, which is their prerogative because they have so many guards in this rotation and so many young players. I'm actually, if there's any critique of their offseason is that they didn't do anything to consolidate that, but I don't think they necessarily have to either. Young team just made the Eastern Conference Finals. I think maybe those types of questions might come up by next offseason, but I thought that they did just fine to not get worse and just give the team a chance to marinate a little bit more, especially given the limitations they had after the Pascal trade with the injuries that Hallie had at the end of the season. So,
cool. This is our final tier list. Unless there's any last minute changes, but I think this was pretty well litigated I think this looks good,
and it's normally distributed. These things tend to look, maybe because we're trying to make it fit that way. Asher, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Is there anything that you would like to plug for the audience?
Follow me on Twitter. All my stuff will be promoted there. Check me out on YouTube. I upload a good amount. I'm going to be uploading more once the season kicks in.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the time.
Over half of you are not subscribed. So if you like our content, please remember to subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, leave us a review. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're on all the sites. Get us in your RSS feed. Follow us on Instagram at What's in a Game NBA. And also check out our clip channel for those quick bites of us doing blooper-ish style things. Sometimes it's just me giggling at things that Will says.
If you have any problems with anything we said during this episode, DM Will on Twitter. Take it up with him.
Yeah, I
At
will
will.
gladly take
If you want
your
to at me,
feedback.
just at will.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I may or may not be kind in response.
And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.